All right, it's another episode of Fun and Truth in Black and White with Pat and Jay. Pat, we have some exciting news this week. We have an addition to our show.
Long overdue, and I'm happy for it.
Okay, so for our listeners, we would like to introduce our third party, Amai Kofi. She's an entrepreneur, socioeconomic activist, chairwoman and founder of the Board of Literacy, where the mission is to advance the financial quotient of youth. She is also the founder of Amai Network Entertainment, an event production company focused on developing platforms centered around financial literacy, wealth creation, and investments. Amai is a writer, producer, director, author of her own entertainment network, and has received various awards and honorary doctorates for her services in communities and business throughout her career since 2005. She is also a Southern Belle from Dallas, Texas. Amai, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for that great introduction. I appreciate it.
Our first guest.
We are delighted to have you on.
I feel honored. Thank you.
So, Jay, let's get right into some current events. What you got for me?
So, it's very interesting, this idea of the highest paid whoever in whatever industry. But it was just announced in Forbes that Kanye West is now the highest paid rapper. Is this significant? I mean, what makes this exciting?
I'm not rude, so ladies first.
Well, I think that the excitement comes from knowing that there's people leveling up. In my opinion, I think it's also exciting to see that an industry that's been going through so many different developments, so many different changes through the course of history, from hip hop being storytelling, to hip hop being people telling their stories, to hip hop being just diverse in so many different categories. Just to see that people are getting their money's worth as artists. It's a tough industry. It is very difficult to make a whole lot of money unless you really know the business. And so just to hear about it from that perspective and all the changes, I think that helps people to have a respect for people who are doing well in the industry, knowing that it's a very difficult industry to be a part of. So that may be some level of excitement, in my opinion.
I think that's valid. And I think the other point of excitement is anyone that has ever seen a Where Are They Now documentary, or a unsung documentary, or just if you just know the history of so many artists who did not own their own masters or got raw deals despite selling millions and millions and millions of records. And to see any artist, in this case Kanye's at the top of the list, but any artist to get what they deserve and what they've earned, that's good. And then I think furthermore, the cross branding, the retail sales of his shoes and other things that he has done, I think also shows how multidimensional, how dynamic, and how talented he is, and so many others are. If you look at the rest of the list, there's guys, Jay-Z and Diddy and others, that they do so much. And, it speaks to their intellect, their ability, and the fact that they're not one-trick ponies. So it's significant. I don't know how significant it is to be at the very top, because when you get to these levels, you're splitting hairs, comparing hundreds of millions of dollars to someone else who has hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's not significant for me in the competitive sense of comparing 1 to 2, and did he really overtake Jay-Z? Because if we're talking about career accomplishments, it's not a comparison yet. But for this year, or for that year that they estimated the values, it's significant. And I look at it more from the perspective of thinking about the Cold Crush brothers and people that got completely railroaded, in yesteryear, and that were like sacrificial lambs, so to speak, so that we can be having this conversation today.
So I'm going to take a completely different slant, which is that I think that this is kind of swordplay this is a Forbes list, and exactly as Pat just mentioned, you're talking about guys that are, either billionaires or close to billionaires in terms of their overall net worth to begin with. And obviously they're at the top of their game. I think that Amai's point of that it's leveling up is certainly a valid point, but at the same time, the challenge to me is that, again, they can argue between themselves of, based on who's making more money and sort of fight from that standpoint. But to the average person, it's like, the numbers and the wealth are way beyond where the average person is, number one. But number two is that I think that it's kind of a superfluous argument to concern yourself with, whether or not you're the highest paid or not. I think it's more important to concern yourself with whether or not you're doing something on the path that you're enjoying.
You know what? Let me interject. And Amai, I want you to respond to this. So many, many, many years ago, when Kanye was new in the game, the first time he made the Forbes list, I was in a barbershop, and Kanye was lower on the list, obviously. And some guy in the barbershop was like, Kanye only made 17 million, right? And he used the word only, right? This is a guy who I happen to know at the time was unemployed, right? So to your point, Jay, when the average person looks at this list, and instead of just looking at it like, wow, these people are doing what they want to do to control over their lives, and I'm going to find inspiration in that. Instead of that being the message, they look at the numbers and begin to compare these people in that way. And like look at it like, oh, well, this one's richer than that one.
Right.
Instead of finding the real value in the list and saying, I can do that too. Like not do what they're doing, but I can do the parallel version in my life, in my universe of what they're doing and finding my purpose. So, Amai, what do you think about that? Do you think the excitement from folk is about inspiration or just looking at the numbers?
Well, I think it's the whole competitive edge, but not in the way to say that, hey, like when I think about the richest guy in the world and they list out people like Bill Gates or Warren Buffett and Bill Gates are not competing against each other. They're looking at the legacy that they're leaving behind. And so for Kanye to reach a list and a level, just forget that it's rap for 1 second and just go into the fact that there's another person climbing the charts in a financial level. And being that we live in a capitalistic society, that's not always easy to climb like that. So I think more people are looking at how a person's climbing versus the fact that they're climbing as a rapper. The fact that he is a rapper definitely gives hope to a lot of people, not just black kids anymore, not just white kids from the suburbs anymore. Like, it's giving hope to a lot of people, period. The fact that the way we've seen rap portrayed, the way we've seen the industry portrayed, the way we've seen Kanye West portrayed, the way we've seen Kim Kardashian portrayed, it starts to make people to also take it a little bit more personally. That I think you have a great point there, Pat, that yes, I can do this. I may be a janitor, but if Kanye's climbing the ranks, that's just giving me inspiration that I know that I can do it. I know there's some type of hope there. And it brings that competitive edge within self versus the competitive edge in the rap game. How about it brings in your self-awareness to say, listen, here's a guy that is doing it in this industry. I know good and well I can do it better in this other industry, or not even necessarily better, but I can challenge myself better. And then in myself, I can do it because Kanye West did it. I think if people could see it from that perspective, then I think maybe there would be more excitement in the fact that, yeah, a rapper is climbing the charts, because rap is not necessarily public society, elder society, oligarch society, necessarily, clapped on and welcomed as much as it may be with millennials or, just different generational and different cultural aspects. So I think people are seeing it from many different facets, and rap in and of itself has raised a lot of people. Hip-hop music has raised a lot of people. And hip-hop has had a struggle, and I think that seeing that people are getting some sense of inspiration, hope, and they're starting to see that, hey, this guy's taking himself seriously. All his outbursts and all the stuff he's been doing, and then even just how he came into the light of where he is, this guy somehow is making a stance, and that can be recognized as being positive.
I think that's great. And you know what? To piggyback on that, something else that's significant is that the majority of his wealth didn't come from rap. Rap was the platform that he used to jump off into everything else. And I think that's a very, very good point that you make, and how he was able to spread his wings. And he's not in a box, and not in his thinking, not in his approach. And also, there was a time when it was cool to be different. And he embodies that. Like, for example, his story isn't I sold drugs and then I became a rapper. And there's nothing wrong with that story. That story is some people's story. But he was a college dropout and entitled his first album, College Dropout. And he found his own path. And I think to that janitor you mentioned, or to a barber, or to whomever, whatever your field, or even if you want to change fields, blaze your own trail. And then from there, he might have had the clothing idea 20 years ago. But the first thing that popped for him was rap. Then he used that as a springboard. Jay?
So I owe the listeners an apology because I forgot to announce the title of tonight's episode is Extra Miles versus Green Miles. And I think we did a good job of just recognizing that because Kanye went the extra miles, that's why he has been recognized now for his achievement. And that's a great distinguishing point that I think between Amaya and Pat, the two of you have really identified that Kanye is deserving of this recognition, not because of the fact that it's the money, but it's the fact that the money is because of him going the extra miles. Now, I'm going to segue that to Eli Manning, who has just been benched by the New York Giants, and it has also been announced that he will retire as the highest paid quarterback in NFL history, even though he's riding the bench, because the Giants picked up this last year of his contract, and it's expected that he's going to retire at the end of the season. We'll see. But either way, he's getting paid a boatload of money, and basically he is walking his green mile in historic fashion. So the fact that he's going to end his career as the highest paid quarterback for the time being, if Tom Brady stays another year or two, he might. But it's the fact that in comparison to someone like Tom Brady, Eli Manning's career, other than, listen, he won us 2 great Super Bowls here in New York, but his record overall was not substantial in terms of win-loss percentage or really, being an outstanding quarterback in terms of his overall stats. How do you guys look at that in terms of, he's going to retire one of the highest paid professional athletes, considering his career was not that exceptional?
Amaya, I'll let you take that one.
I think that's an interesting point to say, exactly the way you put it, or the way that it is. I'm not saying you put it that way, but it's amazing that, maybe for the love of the sport, good old American football, maybe he did have a good career. Maybe we're not looking at Pee Wee football. Maybe we're not looking at middle school, and we're not looking at high school, and we're not looking at college. We're looking at NFL. But you said something about the journey and the mile, right? And so it takes a little while to run a mile, okay? And so that means that there's different levels in the person, and there's different levels in the race. And if we take a collective look at it, then maybe he did play his best and do his best. Maybe by the time he had reached his NFL needed to accomplish. Now, for the game, because everyone's into the sport, yeah, people can say, hey, he didn't perform so well. But he had to have done something to get there. And so if we can look at the whole and not look at the fragmented part of it, maybe he actually did do his best, and then who's to know every single factor centered around the entire player. There is a team, there are coaches, there are owners, there are doctors, there are agents. I mean, it's a lot of stuff that comes with the game. And so from those perspectives, from a whole perspective, maybe he did do better than some people would give him credit for. But if we want to look at just game-by-game stats and such, and people don't feel like he played as good as others, then, hey, he still did what he was supposed to do, and he's, exiting the league the highest paid player. So, maybe he's just one of those guys that have that story, and maybe he's going to be the one to voice what that means. And he can start to explain, yeah, you guys thought that I wasn't playing my best, but this and this happened. We don't know the rest of it is all. That's my thought.
Nice, nicely done. And when I think about it, I think about high leverage moments. So, disclaimer, I'm a die-hard Giants fan. Jay happens to be as well. Like, I can name, the entire roster from like 1986. I'm one of them. I was born into a family where I didn't really have a choice, and I took a love to the Giants. I know a lot about Eli Manning, and being totally honest, his career comes down to 8 games. You see, the 2 Super Bowls they won, they were a wild card team. They played 8 games on the road. And in each game, they were the underdog. And he played out of his mind. So, conversely, the rest of his career outside of that was average or below average. There were years he led the league in interceptions, for example, multiple times. But I always look at it the opposite way. Like, well, if I had a player come to my organization and have the best stats ever for 16 years and never won the title, would I prefer that or a guy that, and when it mattered the most, came through? So Eli has a lot of emotional credit with me. I recognize what he is. I know he wasn't the greatest, but he performed the greatest in the greatest moments. Another thing, I read somewhere in a medical journal, I forget which one it was, but playing in the NFL is the equivalent of being in a car accident once a week. Eli Manning started the second most consecutive games in the history of the NFL. That doesn't mean he wasn't injured. That means he played injured. So I give him a lot of credit for that. I love my statement that he did the best he could. And really, that's what we all want, right? For ourselves and for our loved ones. And so that being said, if he can look in the mirror and say that and feel that, and as far as the money goes, timing is everything, right? That market or that record will get reset with the next person with longevity that retires. So I don't put too much into that. But in terms of his greatness, it's all how you measure it.
Right. So my take on this, Amaya actually said something terrific up front, which is that his whole career from Pop Warner, high school, college, all the way up to the pros needs to be factored into this, and it's not. And that's something that, again, the name Manning alone, the pedigree, had something to do with it. But Eli was recognized as special long before he made it to the NFL, and people talked about it. And the Giants drafted him first overall, and the truth was that from a fundamental standpoint, this kid was exciting to watch, and he was a playmaker. He was a true, get in your face and, give you everything he's got playmaker. Now, one thing that, Pat brought up was that his career really came down to the 8 games of the playoffs in which he won 2 Super Bowls. So what we forget is that those two giant teams were led by two of the greatest defenses to ever play professional NFL sport. And overall, Eli's entire career, he lacked pretty much an offensive line, a incredible receiving core, other than Odell Beckham Jr. at the end of his career, and at the end of Eli's career, not Odell's, but and running back. So throughout Eli's tenure with the Giants, it was this roller coaster ride, other than some incredible defensive units, which is why the Giants really succeeded. So Eli played his role and was able to get an offense to execute that was really subpar, other than Eli.
I want to ask Amai a question. Amai, what would you say is the number one, the most telling stat or observation of someone? Like, for me, I think the most important thing is what your peers can say about you, or your opponents, maybe who you compete with. And I say that because when they interview and poll defensive players throughout Eli's career, they all say they never feared him. Like, he didn't strike. Like, you fear Tom Brady.
Yeah.
They never feared Eli Manning. So I bring that to, I want Amai to answer, but I bring it to your point, Jay. His situation worked.
I will say this, though, before Amai answers. Deion Sanders, as a sports commentator, remember, he was one of the greatest cornerbacks in the history of the game.
Correct.
And a Dallas Cowboy, to our Dallas guest. Deion Sanders always said, as long as Eli was in the playoffs, I believe in Eli.
Correct. But he didn't fear Eli, because he didn't play against him.
No.
So my point is, just going back, I think it's a combination. You mentioned the defense.
Yeah.
He didn't just win 2 titles. He won them in the biggest market on earth.
And not only that, but he won them against the second one. Well, both of them were against the New England Patriots.
And the second one, they were undefeated.
They were undefeated,
so
and expected to be the greatest team
so if you think
history.
about all these things in one bucket,
yes,
I understand his greatness. Because greatness is different than excellence.
Yes.
Greatness is more about accomplishments and high leverage moments.
Yeah.
Excellence is more like a sustained level of being at the top of your craft. Mm-hmm. So my point, back to the question, Amai. So how much do you factor in what his opponents and peers think of him when we do an evaluation?
Well, that's going to be subjective, right? Because that's a very good and valid point. When I was on the court or I was playing sports and you weren't afraid of me, we do have a problem. Let's be honest. You know what I mean? But then we've got to ask why they weren't afraid of him. And we don't know every single aspect of why they were not afraid of him. But it didn't take away from his presence and his skill and ability on the field. So that might not be the largest factor, but it definitely makes somebody pause and question.
It's a good point.
Very good point. So go the extra mile versus green mile. And again, the premise is when you go the extra mile, it might be you literally put in extra work. Whether it's extra physical work, or in a relationship, you go the extra mile with your mate. Versus the green mile, and the analogy, of course, comes from the movie and the whole thought of walking towards your death.
Yeah. Some
Some people may not want to put in the extra work.
You choose your own fate.
Even in a relationship, they might feel, you know what? Well, if I do this extra thing, I'm going to look like a chump or look weak or what have you. So that's where we're going here today.
Let's take a break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to go right into relationships and, making the extra pass, walking the extra mile versus, going the green mile. So we're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
I love it.
All right, we're back. Pat, before we took the break, you had brought up in relationships, going the extra mile and, walking the green mile. And from the standpoint of where relationships go wrong or take a left turn, infidelity, this is where, for some people, it's a matter of, did I go the extra mile, or, is it a matter of, you walk the green mile because you're not willing to, do what's necessary in the relationship, or maybe the relationship's already dead. And within that, I'm going to bring up a point that our guest actually, has talked about to her listeners, and we're going to bring it to our listeners, which is the fact that a relationship with an individual person, monogamy, is not natural. It might be a normal part of our society, but it is not natural. So, we're going to get into this, but, from your standpoint, going the extra mile in a relationship, is it a matter of duty, or is it a matter of recognizing, like in basketball, that if you just make the extra pass, the man with the open shot has a better chance to make the bucket than you do?
You want to go first on this one?
Okay. Well, actually, I wanted to hear from you, Pat, because, this is a very detailed topic. So I definitely want to hear the male perspective before I speak. So, Pat, if I could pass that on to you to kind of get some of your perspective, and, of course, we can all...
Way to make the extra pass.
I love a great pass. And I'm the type, even when I'm not open, I think I'm open. So I appreciate the pass. Okay. I'm glad you asked, because I don't feel it's about duty. I feel it's about expectations and them being set from the beginning. I think every relationship has its own set of rules, and cheating is not just sex. Cheating is anything that goes out of the rules of that relationship. So the thing about the green mile versus the extra mile, you may be actually walking the green mile by not going the extra mile. Like, you might think, if I do this extra gesture for him or for her, I'm playing myself, or I'm putting myself out there, I'm making myself vulnerable, I'm emasculating myself, what have you. But in reality, that second guessing, that I think being selfish is good at times, but that version of being selfish is actually setting you down the wrong path. And the irony of what you mentioned, Jay, about monogamy not being natural, which is a somewhat separate conversation, but for those people who think cheating comes from the fact that your relationship went bad, you might be the one that caused it to go in that direction by not focusing on who you're with. I'll stop there for now. Take that, Amaya.
About all the times that people call me and they're miserable. And this is males and females, and they're miserable and they're crying, and these are adults and teenagers and, different people from different backgrounds and pedigrees and creeds. And I'm like, why is everybody feeling the same exact way every time there's a level of betrayal? And absolutely, the betrayal is not always a physical interaction with someone or a sexual interaction. Betrayal can be the fact that you spend more time doing this thing rather than doing this thing. Betrayal can mean you gave up. And I know you gave up. Who knows? But the point is, I'm like, but why are people so drained and miserable? And so, one thing I told my husband, I've had two. One thing I told my husband was, the one thing that will never ever bother me are your endeavors with other women. So the best thing you could do is sow your royal oats and do what you have to do before you get married. But on the way to marriage, I really want you to know comparison analysis between me and other females, because naturally, people, it's not just a male thing, people are poly thought process. They like to have various different types and styles of relationships for different reasons. And so monogamy is amazing. It is a beautiful discipline, but it is a discipline. And it is something that you grow into. And even though you could be a natural monogamist, it in and of itself, the whole thought process is not necessarily always normal for every single person. And we don't live in a case-by-case society. We live in a society where if a woman does such and such, women do such and such. If a man does such and such, men do such and such. And it's very difficult for us to break away from that. And that's the whole purpose of finding out what is the kicker, what's the theme. And as I started researching and learning and studying and growing and hearing and listening to other people, the main reason why people cheat on each other or they break up is because the relationship has ran its course. They may not have been honest, or they may have been too honest. There are so many variables. But one thing I've seen that's very consistent is people deciding to make a very, very life-changing decision to be with one person for the rest of their life. That is a very challenging thing. And so when I look at the consistency of the challenge, it started to make me think that might not be nature. That might not be natural. If it's such a challenge throughout history, throughout cultures, throughout ages, throughout different various things, it's a very questionable thing that they even say up to like 80% of people end up either cheating and or leaving their spouse for various different reasons. And that just makes me think that, we can say, oh, they weren't happy, they didn't do me right, I didn't like this that happened, or whatever the case may be, but a lot of it might just be that we're not looking at nature as a whole. And so that's what made me make the post, and it went in a very different direction than I thought. And mostly it was 90% males that were like, yay, thank you, help us out. It's difficult for us. And I wasn't even thinking about the male culture. I was really just thinking about all the people that were really bothered by the betrayal of a person and not wanting them anymore.
That's terrific.
They call that betrayal.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's where that post came from.
I think it's terrific. I have to tell you that I feel like I'm the cream in an Oreo cookie right now. Just having a little fun and truth here, because you got some, 2 hard chocolate wafers, and I'm gonna come with a little softness here, and it's based on Pat is talking about going the extra mile in a relationship versus, the green mile, and it sometimes being about your unwillingness to do something for the person because you feel like you're giving something up and you're going to be vulnerable. And that is the interesting part of monogamy, and the fact that what you talk about, Amai, in people being angry and upset about the pain that they've gone through when they've been betrayed. The extra mile in a relationship really is the willingness to be vulnerable, to make that extra step that you're uncomfortable with, to go along with change in the relationship because you want to not only see the other person happy or succeed, or you want to give them a positive feeling of joy or whatever it is. It's also a matter of your own level of satisfaction being fulfilled by doing something that gives you a sense of satisfaction or a sense of joy, positivity, but it's scary. So, the difficulty in relationships, especially when it comes to not just cheating, but whether or not you want to find other people to interact with versus constantly relying on your partner for all of your social engagements. That is one of the challenges within relationships. You go through these stages where, at first you guys are in love, you go through the honeymoon phase, and then life sets in. And, at what point do you break away and, really have your own life while still being in this relationship with, someone that you love and care about? But you have to be able to not be completely magnetically connected to them all the time. You can kind of rotate around and do your own thing, and you kind of orbit each other to a certain extent. And the vulnerability is in being willing to be hurt, being willing to let go, being willing to say, hey, you know what? If this ends between us, it's been an incredible experience, and I'm going to, love you and feel a certain way about you for the rest of my life. But at the same time, if I can't make you happy the way you need to be happy, I don't want to keep you from that happiness. And I want to see you out there doing your thing. So sometimes that's what keeps a relationship strong, is that willingness to be vulnerable, to let go, to let the other person have a chance to walk away. And that makes the relationship stronger because the other person is just like, you know what? Now I have a real chance to evaluate what I have.
Amai, I have a question. Since you seem to have a pretty big sample space of people you've spoken with, mentored, or helped, or listened to, what percentage of the people that were so miserable that we talked about, what percentage of them were married? And what percentage of them were just in relationships without matrimony? I'm just curious.
You're saying how many of them were married?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I get what you're saying. I would say it was about 50% of the people were married and the other 50% were in a relationship.
Okay.
This is throughout the course of years. This is not something that happened at one time.
Understood. No, I asked that question because there are those that feel it's marriage which complicates relationships. And I always felt it can't be marriage. It just has to be maybe living together. Because marriage is just, I'm not minimizing marriage, but you can share your space and time and energy with someone without being legally married. So I was just wondering that. The next thing is, I think it is unnatural to be with one person. I do subscribe to that theory. I believe that media, whether it's love songs, things on television growing up, we have been trained to believe being with one person is what's right, in air quotes. Like, that's what's right with the world. And as a result, I think people start to look at their age or their biological clock and think, this is what I need to do. Like, this is what we're supposed to do. And I think people just choose wrong. Like, I think for some people, it's probably like lightning in a bottle. I think it's that rare. For some people, they meet that one person that happens to meet all of their needs, and they don't veer off at all. Okay, but to Amai's point, I think we're far more dynamic than that. And I think people have different likes, dislikes, wants, needs at different, it could be simultaneously. You feel these different things, or like you said, Jay, you might shift and it goes through phases. So, it's alarming, like the divorce rate or the rate or the amount of people that are just so unhappy. And the thing about it is, most of the people that are so unhappy are staying in their situations. So there's so many layers to this, but I think going the extra mile is something that's innate. See, I said it before, true love loves back. So when you feel like that zenith of joy, you will inherently do for the other person. Like you just will. Like you're not gonna have to think about it. When you have to make a conscientious decision, let me do this nice thing, and if it's disingenuous, eventually it'll fizzle out.
That's a great point. Now, it's not, there's probably people that cringe because people just don't want to deal with these scientific or biological factors of our humanity. They don't. They want to. A lot of people try to pull in religion, and you would be shocked that it was. I would have thought that it would have been the women. It was the men. Like, no, we're faithful in these streets, and I'm like, no, actually, you're not. And it's not just males, and it's not to bash men, but males definitely have a more challenging time in being in a committed, faithful relationship with one woman than women do with a man. Not to say that women don't even cheat at the alarming rates, but I think you said it best. Both of you guys have explained it. People cheat for different reasons, or people leave for different reasons. However, it is 50-50. Women are right there with men when it comes to cheating. It's just that women don't get caught as often. And women don't brag about it. They don't have an egotistical value on it because a lot of the times they're cheating because they're trying to get away. And sometimes men are cheating just to cope and deal, to stay. So it's different reasons on why we do what we do, but I can never take cheating seriously without having the discussion of being polygamous. I can never even take that very seriously without even thinking that maybe that man wants you for this thing, and maybe that woman wants you for this thing. But you cannot be the all catch-all, one-all, be-all. Now, if you happen to fit a high amount of qualities that a person is looking for, and if you happen to fit the mold of what someone would call my everything, or the one who completes me, or whatever these weird sayings are, and you happen to fit that mold, you still can't do that every day, all the time. And people say that we only use 10% of our brain. We actually use 100% of our brain different times. Like when you walk through a home, and especially a mansion, for example, you're not going to be in every part of the mansion all the time. But do you use 100% of the home? Eventually I do. So we have all these sayings and these weird things in this nomenclature where we actually pull that into the way that we relate to each other. And so I might love Paul for this reason, and I might not want to have a physical relationship with Paul, but I treat Paul more like my husband than I do Brad, who I do have a physical relationship with, and I love him for that reason. And then I love this guy because he reminds me of my father, and I love this gentleman because he got me out of my bad spot. And they always ask the proverbial question, can you love more than one person at the same time? Yes. Well, can you be in love with more than one person at the same time? Yes. But that's just the way I think from the biological. From an emotional standpoint, a spiritual standpoint, that can be very dangerous and disheartening to yourself. So it's not safe to do it, but if you wanted to, you could. And I think people just don't want to have natural, normal conversations without pulling in religion or feelings and all this other weird stuff. And that's the reason why I think it's a really good subject to talk about. And it doesn't mean we're trying to convert anybody. It's just a conversation that we definitely need to have because we are, in fact, human.
So, Amai, does this come down to just honesty? Like being honest with yourself and then doing that first and then going out into the world, and as you meet and deal with people, being able to be honest with them? Like, does it really come down to just that?
Well, it's so difficult, Pat, because when you consider that we live in this hypersensitive, overly emotional, debatable society, who can be honest with who? And how many people can you really tell how you really feel? Candidly. There are times where you're with people that you're most comfortable with, and you still can't say exactly what you want to say, how you want to say it, the way you think it should come out. And so just imagine being honest that I'm not polygamous. However, I understand I would never hit my child, but I know why you whooped that one. There's things that I would never do, but I see why other people do them, right? So if I say, oh my gosh, I wouldn't whip my baby, but I understand why she whipped hers. Oh, my whooped kids. So it's like we've got to be very careful about honesty and transparency and vulnerability, and even being able to do that with people. And vulnerability is one of the most beautiful, most powerful, strongest things I've ever seen. But I don't know if people are mentally healthy and behaviorally healthy and emotionally healthy to deal with vulnerability and honesty and truth. So yes, on one hand, I think it's mandatory. However, we also know you can't run around here with your mandates and expect to be respected, because people don't want to hear the truth. They're so used to it, and they say, oh, you know, the truth is, what they say, not the truth will make you cry, but
the truth set,
truth hurts.
Truth hurts, or
Right, and the
set you free.
Yes, but the truth hurts. It's like, no, the truth does not hurt. It is all the lies you believed on the way there. The truth is very beautiful, right? But it's all the lies you believe that begin to hurt you when you finally reach the point of truth. And so on one hand, yes, Pat, I think we need to be very, very honest and just take a stance on honesty and being honest. Like, babe, I don't know if I'm going to be with you for the rest of my life. That pastor can say whatever vows he wants, or that book can tell me whatever I'm supposed to know, or that premarital counseling session can say what it wants to say. But I honestly don't know if I'm going to be with you for the rest of my life. We can't say that.
You know what?
We can't say that to ourselves.
You know what?
You know, and that's how I feel.
No, I love it. And essentially what you're saying is you can, ideally, a person could be honest so long as the receiver understands that there's no judgment. Like, I can be honest, we can disagree, and I still not pass judgment on you. But as you said, the best word you said, the hypersensitive world we're in. Jay?
So, you know, I think that the two of you, again, are taking a hard look at the way in which people choose directions. And I'm gonna again try and give a soft approach here, which is that we forget that in a relationship we're constantly figuring out on the fly that, you know, when things happen, I mean, once you get past the initial stages of dating and you've gotten to know each other, one of you comes home and you have a bad day, the other person might not know or understand what happened, and if you don't ask the right questions or you say the wrong thing, the other person is in a bad mood, and you have to learn their moods, you have to learn their mannerisms, and that takes time. And that's if you're willing to learn. So again, as a relationship evolves, and this is part of the challenge, is that a relationship is not a straight path. And when Amai said that, you know, for a man or a woman to say, I want to be with you for the rest of my life, at the moment that they say that, they may mean it. However, the next day, based on how things are going, how they're feeling, the, you know, waxing or waning of the moon, you know, where all of the planets are in alignment, they could break up. You know, you just don't know from day to day what's going to happen. And it's, you know, to your guys' point about honesty, it's really about being honest with yourself, but having something called faith. And faith is something that is very hard for people to have in themselves, much less another person. And faith comes from a willingness to let go. And this is the vulnerability. I'm not going to get into religion and why people are not, you know, as religious as they used to be, or if they're more spiritual or less spiritual. But what I am going to say is that faith as a practice, faith as something that really is recognizing that there is a greater power than us, is something that our current generation, our current world has become very superficial about. Faith is a very deep thing, and especially when it comes to a relationship, learning how to trust each other and how to have faith in each other, and when you make decisions that the other person has been thought about, or you're making the decision with the best intentions in mind for both people, that is an incredible amount of faith that the other person has to have in a relationship with each other. So, to give an example, you've been together for a year and one of you decides to book a trip for the two of you to go away. Surprise. The other person may take it the wrong way, not because you didn't have the thought in mind, but because for them, they don't like surprises and they like to be, made aware of everything, because for them, it's really about being able to plan for every moment what could go wrong. They're just that type of person. And getting them past that hurdle to where they can have faith in you is something that may be more than just you and that person's love for each other. It may be more than what you see on the surface as necessary in order for them to be able to trust you. It may have something to do with them that has nothing to do with you at all. And if you're not willing to meet them where they are, then the issue is you don't have faith in them to move forward at their pace, not at yours. You're expecting them to just come along with you based on you doing all the things that you think they need to see in order to have faith in you. And you're not understanding that that person is going through a whole universe of experience that may have nothing to do with you in terms of their ability to move forward and have faith in you, as well as in the rest of the world, as well as in themselves.
No, I love it. That's great. I mean, it's a great point. Kat, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for bringing that part into it. And it's great that you brought that up. And again, it's always case by case for me. So.
Yeah, and I just I want to speak up. I'm just envisioning what the listeners are going to say when they email us. There are those that are just protecting themselves. Like it's not that they are afraid of the green mile or don't want to go the extra mile. They have baggage. Even if the baggage is just mental scar tissue, like even if nothing bad actually ever happened to them, they might know some people that it did. And they're concerned. Some people are just very risk averse and just scared, and fear can debilitate anybody, in any situation.
That's exactly
So I just want to throw it out there that not everybody is not going the extra mile for the reasons we've stated so far. There may just be someone who just doesn't want to end up like their best friend that was crying for 6 months, or chopped off all their hair because they got their heart broken, or lost a bunch of weight, or you just never know. People, they have a prism and they see life through that prism, and you don't know. And granted, some would argue, well, if you're that afraid and that guarded, you're not with the right person. I mean, we can go on and on and on and on. I just think each situation, as Ahmad just said, is different. Jay, let's take a break.
Yep.
And we'll be right back.
All right, we'll be right back. All right, we're back. This is Fun and Truth in Black and White with Pat and Jay and Omai today. And we're going to wrap up by starting with Omai giving us her take on not only this episode, but, where things are going.
Awesome. First of all, you guys are awesome. And thank you to all the listeners that tune in and get this good information, conversation, and relationship. You can tell you guys have known each other, for a while, just through the way that you all converse. I love the balance of the differences of thought and theory, so that's awesome, as well as truths and facts. So that's a great combination. Again, I know that some people may have just tuned in and not are fully aware of every single thing, but talking about going the extra mile versus going the green mile is very important. And so with that, I'd like to go ahead and branch into my passion, which is financial literacy and education and raising the financial quotient of our youth, which means there are communities that they're involved in. And a lot of it is based off of how we relate to our youth, how we were related to as youth, depending on, where you come from, who you were around, your environment growing. You're going to have a different story for yourself and the way you were related to. But it still starts to breach on us as adults, or when we get a little bit older, we start to look back at our youth and just some of the stuff that's happening now, and they're losing their lives, they're committing homicide and suicide at very, large rates. But then there are also a great level of youth that are rising up, wanting to become leaders, rising up and wanting to do more, rising up and still wanting to make a difference. And so our role is not to judge which youth we choose to deal with. Our role is just to make sure that we give back, and that's through our nonprofit called the Board of Literacy. And in the Board of Literacy, my heart has been to teach youth, financial education, wealth management, growth, generational wealth, creating legacies. But the concerns have always been something that's more personal, more in depth to them, and just how they are living at home. And so because of that, we just have a strong passion to deal with our youth. So if you ever want to get involved, our website is www.theboardofliteracy.org, and you can email me on my at president@theboardofliteracy.org to find out more information if you want to get involved in helping out our youth. And so I just appreciate Jay and Pat for the opportunity to be on the show and have just, adult conversation. And that is my passion. I just wanted to share with our audience today, and with our youth, if they're listening, or any parents that are, wanting to say, hey, I don't know anything about it, but please help my child. That's what we're here for.
Awesome. So, Pat, I don't give a fuck about your failure to launch. And here's what I mean. I go on the gram and see all these kids trying to launch their entrepreneurial career, only to say, I don't know what I'm doing. Only to say, oh, I'm not making enough money. Only to say, oh, well, this guy or this girl is doing this. How can I, get in there but not really do anything? I've been an entrepreneur since, I was in high school or whatever. And here's what it's about. The same thing that a baby learns to crawl and then walk. You've got to fail, you've got to fail, you've got to fail. You cannot be afraid to fail. The more you fail is the more you will succeed. So if you are afraid to launch, if you are a failure to launch, guess what? You just got to get back up on that horse. You got to get back up off the ground, dust yourself off, and keep going. And in relationships, it's the same thing. You don't know how to come? Let's get some sex toys. You don't know what you're doing? Let's read some manuals or some books or talk to each other. I don't give a fuck about your failure to launch, because we have this incredible thing called Dr. Google. There is nothing that you cannot find out from Dr. Google. There is nothing that you cannot learn to do without Dr. Google. We didn't have Dr. Google when I was a kid, so I don't give a fuck about your failure to launch.
I dig it. I'm the third leg, and you guys did a great job. My PSA is about loyalty. be careful giving it out. People get betrayed all the time, and that's not okay. But I think a bigger issue is giving out your loyalty blindly. In my experience, there are very few people who will be loyal to you, like truly loyal to you. Generally speaking, everyone in your life, they have an angle. It's a give and take. People are in your life for a reason. Not that they're using you, but maybe they're benefiting from your relationship with them and vice versa. And the second one person isn't benefiting, the relationship, falls apart. So, but in terms of loyalty, don't be blind, don't be stupid. Do not give your loyalty out without being sure. How are you sure? Be observant. Pay attention. People will show you who they are if you just pay attention. And I think sometimes people fall in love with the idea of certain things. Like, the notion of having a best friend, the notion of having a ride or die, the notion of giving this person my all. People take it so far. They're like, you know what? The sex is great, so here's keys to my place. Here's my debit card password. Here's all my passwords to my, people just go so far, and then a lot of times the other person hadn't necessarily earned that level of trust. So I just think with loyalty, don't be so guarded that you're not open to get close to someone, but just be smart about it. Don't fall in love with the notion of things. When something is real and a person is real, be loyal. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up to be played, or even worse, to be hurt.
So I want to thank Amai. This has been an absolutely wonderful episode. Pat, I'm going to wrap this up really nicely and say that, it always comes down to choice. The choice to make the extra mile is one that, again, may be a question of vulnerability, and it's obviously a opportunity for faith. But green miles are okay too sometimes. And walking a green mile, it may be that you're making the choice to just enjoy how it goes. And the truth is that what comes after the green mile may not be so bad sometimes. And I'd like the listeners to just, think about that, when they're going off, regardless of whether this is their career, their relationship, or just in terms of where they are in life. You can go the extra mile because you believe in something, or you can walk the green mile because sometimes it's just, okay to enjoy that last mile and, move beyond. This has been Fun and Truth in Black and White with Pat and Jay. And Amai, thank you again. You've been wonderful.
Amai, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
We'll catch you guys all next week. All right. Take care.